called Optimizing New Search Platforms. So I will let these guys get settled and take it away.
Hey, guys.
Give you the center stage. Perfect. Let me try to put good socks on over here.
Wearing a tie on a Saturday morning, I'm kind of intimidated as the moderator here.
This is my outfit. This is the monkey suit that I wear.
Okay, we're going to talk about optimizing for new search platforms. And I'm going to have you guys introduce yourself, and I've been doing a little bit where I come up with something else on top of that after you introduce yourself. So your name, your company, what you do, and then something. But I haven't come up with anything. I was going to come up with your first search engine. Is that a good one? I'm open to other suggestions there.
All right. My name's Alex Porter. I'm with Location 3. The first search engine, I think, was probably Alta Vista that I used.
CMGI?
And I do have to give a shout out. My two boys, Xavier and Zachary, should be watching live right now. So hi, guys.
Clap it for children. I'm Dan Toplitt. I work at Reprise. We're a global digital full-service marketing agency. I don't know if I'm going to go with the first search engine from the early days, but maybe my favorite of Dogpile, which is actually how I got introduced to Google. So they sent me right to their competition.
Excellent. Well, we were going to talk about some exciting new search engines that you guys probably have never heard of, like Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves. That's actually still around. I don't know if you know, if you type it in, it actually still is around. They changed the butler to like a little banker guy, which, where'd that come from? I don't know. I assume people still use it. No, we're going to talk about not just optimizing for new search platforms being something like Pinterest, although we'll get into that as well, but also something that Alex sent over this morning, which I thought was perfect. It's Google Lens. Now, I couldn't get it on my phone. I couldn't figure out how you did it. So I know you have an Android phone. Is that why you were able to?
So if you have Google Photos, if you use Google Photos and you take a picture, there's just automatically a little button at the bottom for the lens. Okay. So if you click on that button, I don't know if we have the image. So this was a picture I took yesterday of Steve and the panel, and then just clicked on the lens button, and it goes and searches the image. So what it actually did is one of the main things it found was Bing. So we're Googling Bing here in this image. And then you can then click on that and go to Bing and find out kind of all the results. But if you take a picture of, like I took a picture of this beer and clicked on it, and shows you, what the beer is and where to find it and things like this. So some definite implications for anyone that is a retailer. Kind of image search is something that was a big talking point years ago for an SEO perspective, but I think this is here. So you can take a picture. You're in the Home Depot. You take a picture of the product. You're going to get the information around that and potentially price comparisons and that sort of thing. So it's definitely in beta right now, but something that we should all be paying attention to.
Yeah, coincidentally, I actually was on a podcast at my agency talking about voice and visual search, and we ran through an exercise similar to this. Podcast is IPG Media Lab. So I think it's episode 13 or 14, so check it out. But we actually took a picture of a shoe and with the lens, and we tried to see what kind of information it would pull up on the shoe. So it got the brand right, some of the attributes, like it was a red shoe and it understood that, but there was still some details that it didn't quite get. So we're kind of in the early stage of developing understanding from a visual search perspective of what all the attributes are within an image. And we talk from an SEO standpoint a lot about schema markup to mark up your written content. You think about kind of image attribution or image microdata. That's kind of a new wave of how do we break down every single image into its little micro parts and then make that all searchable.
And it ties into kind of some of the topics that have come up with the augmented reality, right? So we're kind of using our devices to help us process the information around us, which will lead to search and hopefully purchase at some point.
Dan, what were you using when you did that image search? Was that on Google or was it Pinterest?
It was Google Lens, yeah.
So what do you, the two of you, what do you believe is the most disruptive, whether it be a new search engine itself or just new search platform? What do you think is coming next? Or here?
Our agency is very focused on multi-unit businesses and franchise businesses, and so we've got a very keen interest in local. I think both you and I both predicted this year would be kind of the year that Facebook becomes a search engine. I think that whether or not it becomes a search engine, it already is. Very similar to like a YouTube. People go to Facebook and look locally all the time. So we're very keen on how do we optimize the Facebook places and the Facebook locations so that they are showing up, and then what are those opportunities? I don't think that Facebook was ever going to roll out a CPC search model for those search results, and I don't think their revenue is hurting from it.
No, probably not.
But I think whether or not they call themselves a search engine, they are. Like Facebook is a major player in local search right now. Pretty much, we focus on Google, Bing, Apple, and Facebook, and really feel that if we have those areas covered, we've got 97% of the local market covered. And Facebook is definitely growing in that space pretty significantly.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and give you two answers, and they're very related. I would say kind of the mix of voice and commerce search. So we've talked a lot about e-retailer. Amazon's obviously the big gorilla, but that stat that people like to quote from Bloomreach, which is 55% of all Amazon search or all product searches start on Amazon. It's really 71% of all product searches start on retailers, because there's a whole another 16% of all the other kind of Targets and Walmarts and what have you. And you think about, we're moving all of our budgets towards kind of conversion-based optimization. Everyone's trying to get right into the bottom of the funnel. And Amazon itself is just figuring out now that it's this massive search engine, and they're building up their media capabilities from a search standpoint. We had Ken Shu talking about some of the integrations there. But that's obviously a really big thing coming on. And then voice search obviously is huge. I'm sure all search marketers here have heard the ComScore study of 20 or 50% of all searches by 2020 are going to be voice. How many of those are going to be what's the weather is kind of a question I think marketers are trying to understand. How many of those are going to be commercial, but particularly when you get to a voice and visual combined component, that's where I think you really open up a lot of possibilities.
I agree. I always think about that because, Amazon would come in with us on cars, and it's like, is somebody going to type, are they going to voice, like, buy me a new car? No, it's not going to happen, right? But they might say, what is the best car? Or what is the best MPG, or something to that effect. But it's not really the same as just a demand. It's more, and that way it's actually more of a search. And I don't think they're quite where they need to be yet on that.
Well, they very well could say, find me a steak restaurant nearby.
That they absolutely can do, yeah.
I just have a question for the audience. Does anyone out here know how to measure the amount of voice search you're getting to your website? Has anyone
Do you know this?
No, I don't. Oh. No, that's a real question.
So we actually...
do you know?
Clients using who are basically just filtering out questions plus X amount of long tail terms and words, and they're identifying and labeling those as voice queries.
So any possibility that Cortana is going to give us that information?
Yeah, so I don't know if you know or not, but Bing is kind of the emerging player in voice because we power a lot of Alexa. We were driving Siri, but that ended when Google came in and paid for that partnership recently. But we also have Cortana, so we are just amassing like a massive amount of voice data right now. And we're trying to find ways for our clients and partners to be able to extract that and then use it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, so we actually have a case study with one of our clients, a large financial services client. And one of the ways that we use to measure our success in voice search is the featured snippet. So in Google or Bing, when you answer or you ask a query on desktop or mobile, you'll have that little box. And there was, I think it was someone on Moz who did a study, which was a very painfully boring Saturday afternoon, I'm sure, where he just went through all of these different queries and then matched what does my Google Home say versus what do I see on the Google answer box. And I think he saw about 71% of the time those two actually matched up. So there's a bit of a proxy there. And the case study that we did is we actually took the novel concept of answering the question directly within content. So our team would go into content that's on the website, update it to more directly target some of these longer tail, voice-ish type of searches, and then we'd measure the success based on how many more quick answers or featured snippets we would get. And ultimately what we're able to do is outpace these other large financial services clients that had much bigger marketing budgets than us, and we were able to kind of get into that position 0 or pre-advertising placement of being able to communicate with the customer before they reach all the ads.
Yeah, I think it just in the sense of optimizing for those platforms, you hit the nail on the head. There's no real guidelines out there, but there's a lot of educated guesses. Try to answer the question, write your content conversationally, and you're gonna have a better chance than not to show up for those.
Yeah, interestingly enough, they've done some correlation studies on what actually gets you into that featured snippet, and the featured snippet itself, I think, is something like 120 words. It's a very small amount of content, but the pages that actually trigger featured snippet tend to have 2,000-3,000 words of content. So they tend to actually be longer pages, but the snippet is pulling out a very small section of that page. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of the user in the search engine environment looking for a very quick answer, and hence the name, but going into the website and actually being able to dig in really in depth into the topic for more information.
And then meanwhile, the featured snippet will probably be gone in 6 months too. So
that may very well be. I don't know if Dewey has a comment that he can publish here in front of SIS people. But.
Now, I'm going to ask this one for you, Dan, from an SEO perspective, non-paid. How much would you value? And I kind of know the answer, but any tips or tricks, and how much would you value just content of the pages themselves, or of the actual landing environment wherever they're going, and what that might look like on a future or even current search engines with some of the new changes?
Well, I think the interesting thing about this topic overall is kind of the fragmentation of search that's happening. That Jump Shot published a study that Google is still the massive leader in U.S. search, but then you have YouTube, and you have Amazon, and you have Twitter and Bing and Yahoo, and it's everywhere for various intents. People are going to those specific places to find the experience that they need. So it's not always Google. And so that kind of changes your content strategy that we've always historically thought from an SEO perspective, put content on the website, make it relevant to the things that people are searching in Google, and kind of the field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. But what we're finding is actually what you really need to do is treat your website and your content more as kind of a database about information about yourself, and this bleeds into local, which I'm sure Alex will talk a lot about, where there's just information about your business or about the topics that are important to your customers that you want to be the voice on, but customers aren't always going to come to your website now. So you have to make your content relevant, but you also have to make it sort of distributable in these different environments that maybe aren't all kind of visual and looking at a website. Maybe it's in voice, or maybe it's in a Pinterest pin or some other place where they're searching for that information where they're maybe not going to reach your website to get the information.
Yeah, and I could chime in from a local perspective. One of the biggest challenges, let's say you have 600 fast sign centers across the U.S., each one's basically doing and offering the same thing. So you run into some potential duplicate content issues. But what you can leverage is just what is unique about those locations. So whether it's pulling in testimonials that are, especially if it's like, hey, this one's great, and it's right around the corner from the Home Depot, and there's like very specific location information. That's really the key to maximizing that local content is put the basics in there, but then make sure that you are customizing it.
Does anybody know what percentage of searches are local based? Do either of you? I don't. Bing, perhaps? I don't know.
I don't know the most recent stat. I know that the growth in near me from 2014 to 2017 was huge, but then it kind of also stopped a little bit too, because people were realizing that they were getting the local result regardless.
Already, yeah.
So it kind of took off and flatlined a little bit. And I think it really depends on the type of search. The financial services is not going to be local intent where many other things. If we were trying to find some pizza last night, that's definitely a local search.
Yeah, I mean, they say 86% of statistics are made up, so I could tell you exactly how many. But I mean, I know voice, obviously, we've talked about is kind of, I think right now it's about 10% of all searches that are happening, and they're predicting, by 2020 it'll be about 50%. And local or voice search is sort of inherently local. Most of your voice searches you're looking for information that's around you, whether it's the weather, whether it's, where's the nearest pizza place, or is CVS open? Like all these questions, there aren't. I would say the majority of kind of voice-based questions are going to be local, and local could be like turn on my lamp, which is hyper local. But I think you're kind of using these assistant technologies to influence the world around you or find out more information about the world around you, not necessarily kind of the more philosophical conversations you're having with Alexa or Google.
You can actually have some philosophical discussions with Alexa if you ever try it. I would say this, I'm going to date myself. Like 20 years ago, I wrote this little thesis in college, and it was all, it was the World Wide Web back then. And the big thing was you could talk to somebody in China. I was like, well, who the hell am I going to talk to in China? I don't really need to talk to someone in China. What I need to know is the restaurant down the street open? And, do they have this on sale and all those kinds of things? And Facebook, and you guys mentioned that, I'm going to jump back to it. Yeah, every time I'm on Facebook now, every single time, especially if I'm eating or I sit down at a restaurant, your friend has been here, blah, 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 blah. It tells you. So as you and I talked about a little earlier, I mean, no, they probably won't brand themselves a search engine, but for all extensive purposes, they're sort of becoming that way. Do you see that with any other social media? I mean, is there any other platform other than Facebook that is glamming on to that local?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it goes back to, again, that they're not calling themselves search engines, and you can't necessarily buy the media like a typical search engine, but the users are treating them as a search engine. And I think that's, like, who cares what they call themselves? Like, you are what you are. Just quick show of hands here. Who here has the Nextdoor app downloaded on their phone? Okay. So 26 million US households have Nextdoor. I have it. I think we just got a deck from them recently, but I think they said that 56% of all activity is looking for recommendations or to buy something on Nextdoor. And then you can buy media, geo-targeted and contextually relevant. So if you are Home Depot and people are, hey, I'm looking to buy a new, whatever you look to buy, a gas dryer, because I just did that. Boom, you can have the Home Depot ad right there. So certainly not your typical search, but I mean, talk about a perfect hyperloop. I mean, you can only download Nextdoor. You have to, confirm you live in that neighborhood to even be a part of that. So it's very, the targeting is phenomenal. You know everything about me if I'm in Nextdoor. I'm going back to the kind of data and privacy. But you don't really think about it. You're like, hey, this is super useful for me because I can connect with my neighbors. But talk about, really a local search engine. I mean, that is a local search engine.
Yeah, I think kind of the dark horse here is Amazon. I mean, people don't really think about Amazon as a local search engine because you're not returning locations. But, we saw that from Kenshu, kind of the double hump graph of when people are searching on Amazon. The second time, you're probably going to buy it on Amazon because you might be a Prime member and it's easier. But the first time you're doing research, and we've seen that people will do research on Amazon and then go into a store and buy it. I mean, you have the more typical behavior of going into a store, figuring out what you want to buy, and then ordering it on Amazon. But it does work both ways. And so when you think about kind of local, and you see this with like Google, what they're doing with Google Express, they have kind of that choose your own adventure. You look up on Google Express, what's a product that I need, paper towels. It's a Target nearby. Do I want Google Express to deliver it to me, or am I just going to go pick it up because I know it's in stock based on my feed management to Google? So the shopping platforms are really kind of local searches in a way.
I just kind of, one of our jobs as agencies is to be out there and be kind of the research and development arm and testing and learning and trying to bring these new opportunities, whether that's a Nextdoor. Amazon's not as so new, but I think one of the things that sometimes we forget is that there's a lot of tried and true platforms out there that we don't maximize. I talk about lost impression share and things like that. And I think that one of the areas that we're continuing to push on is actually with Bing. People we work a lot with franchisees, and they think Google first. But the Bing traffic actually converts really, really well, and it's very localized. And I know they've got some new things coming out with the audience network to really get some great insights into what you're doing. But I think there's kind of the chasing the shiny object. But a lot of times it's like, let's make sure that the blocking and tackling is done. And I think that's important for us and our clients to realize as well.
Yeah, there's a really good point about some of those, like Bing or when you think Google first, it's really about kind of the platform. I mean, it was sort of the war of operating systems with Apple and Google, and it's now kind of the war of algorithms, the war of AI. And you look at like Alexa being built into washers and dryers, and all these partnerships with these different manufacturers, where you're building kind of this brain from Alexa or from Google or from Cortana. And that brain is sort of all coming back to a centralized way of determining what's relevant in the environment that brain is going to be in. And so you really do have to think about not only what's the search on Bing.com, but what's the search on Alexa, or what's the search on another platform where Bing is powering that information.
Okay, we're going to play a little game I just made up in my head actually here called Search or Social, or something else if you want. I'll name a term, and you guys tell me which one you think it is. LinkedIn.
Social.
Search.
All right. Pinterest.
Search.
Also search.
I'm going to go with search on that one. Although, I'm just going to interject real quick. There's one of the maxims I think of search is that it's a very small amount of time you search, but it gets 100% of your attention, right? But that's not true with Pinterest. My wife will spend hours on Pinterest. So the amount of time of search, and so will I, by the way. I go in there for DIY stuff. But yeah, that's a change. That's like a huge change in search, that you would spend that much time just in the search process before you even do anything. So, all right.
I feel like I have to elaborate on my LinkedIn search comment.
Go for it.
Heard some gasps in the audience. I want to make sure everybody's okay. I think you buy media on LinkedIn as if it's social. So there's sort of this, it's been plugged into this kind of social group. But I think the interactions that happen a lot on LinkedIn, you go on, if you're going to a conference, you go on and you stalk everybody, and those are all searches, right? And if you're using LinkedIn Premium, you're kind of searching for your next job. So I think there's a lot of search activity that maybe advertising isn't quite focused on that from a LinkedIn perspective, but I think the behavior on LinkedIn that the user has is very based in search.
So like the stalking behavior is search, but like the day-to-day is more social networking.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, stalking is one of the most primitive forms of search. If you really
Then Facebook definitely is a search.
That's our
Facebook is search.
We got to put that up there. Stalking is the most primitive form of search. That's our big takeaway. Snapchat.
Social.
Social.
YouTube.
Search.
I agree.
I'm almost willing to say social on YouTube lately. I can go into more detail later.
How
This is
dare
about
you.
guys. I don't know. I mean, I see so much back and forth with the comments. I think if they made a few changes, it would basically be what Google's looking for. It would be their social platform.
I think Facebook kind of veering away from YouTube and building their own native video platform kind of destroyed that opportunity a little bit for YouTube.
Wolfram Alpha.
Search.
I concur.
House.
Oh, search. Also, I'm trying to buy a sectional couch right now. I spent like an hour on House, and I'm very frustrated.
I would say search and try West Elm.
Word of mouth.
Are there any I missed there? Any other things you guys want to throw out there that we'll play search or social on? Come on, you could just name it out.
TripAdvisor.
Ooh,
Definitely search.
I go with search.
Seems there's so many reviews on it though. It seems very social.
You
I mean,
say
talk
thing
about the
with
back
Yelp,
and
you
forth.
could say the same thing. Yeah, absolutely.
What does the TripAdvisor person say?
There you go. Yeah, Dan from TripAdvisor. I think TripAdvisor has a bit of an identity crisis. I think a lot of people think of it as social, so going on looking for reviews, and we like it to be more search and people going on and booking. So it's a problem we're dealing with every day. We have a huge amount of traffic, but trying to monetize it is the hardest part. So I think, if I was being honest, I think it's probably seen more as a social platform than a search at the moment, but we're trying to move it, definitely.
So I was right.
But I was helping him a little more.
Okay. Where would you say, and this is for both of you, either one can start, 5 years from now, what do you think a search engine will look like? Or will there even be a look?
I think 5 years from now, it's, you know, who knows if we will even have phones. I think, you know, 5 years from now, it's going to be, I don't know. Like I said at the beginning, my kids 8 and 11, you know, they're growing up in a world that's possibly exciting, possibly frightening, but, you know, a search very well could be, hey, somebody do something, like just talk in the air, like it's just there, or you know, you're talking into your something, like there's some magical device or implant in our brains that, or eyes or something that, I don't know. I can't, 5 years I can't do it. Yeah.
Okay, 3 years.
I would say that I think that we're probably going to have a lot of the same kind of devices or platforms. I think it's going to fragment more from a behavior standpoint, where right now we're kind of fragmenting out by platform, so more people are starting in e-commerce for kind of transactional type searches. People are going to Pinterest for kind of inspiration, discovery. I think people are going to start searching more with their voice, with images, with audio files, you know, ways of searching that are moving further and further away from typing, because typing is just a very inefficient way of searching, particularly if you're still going to be doing it on a phone with, you know, thumbs the size of sausages. So I think you're going to really start seeing a lot of different types of searches. And on the podcast, I think we even got into the crazy world of searching by smell, which I'm very excited to see that happen. You know, wake up in the morning and smell bacon. I
don't know if I want that to
searching for that. I think it'd be interesting.
I have a kind of a running theory, or somewhat of a joke, that like the refrigerator is the future of digital marketing, because the refrigerator is likely never going away. I don't know if we'll ever find a way to keep food cold, and people engage with the refrigerator all the time. So why not that be the center of everything you do? You go in the morning, you know, your fridge tells you what's going on, you talk to it, you ask for a search, it reorders everything for you. So I'm putting all my bets on the refrigerator.
Well, I mean, Alexa's in refrigerators, and I think that's exactly that's exactly the point. I think that you have all your devices around, you're going to be able to conduct searches for you, and you're just going to, as you say, walk and talk to yourself, but really you're talking to robots. So
if anybody just wants to tweet that, Alex Porter, the fridge is the future, that's my platform.
I like it. Are you standing because we're getting there in time?
You guys are doing great, but wanted to ask the audience if they have anything to ask these folks. I mean, you covered pretty much everything, but Nicole, let's just remind us that you're Nicole and where you work.
I'm still Nicole, still from calls. I still have a lot of questions. For image search, what do you guys think we need to do for feeds to stay relevant and to actually show up? Like, are we going to need to adjust things? Is it still going to be Google requirements that we're going after? Any ideas?
At a minimum, mark up your images, put alt text behind them, name the files appropriately, you know, do all the things you need to do to make sure that these algorithms that are starting to learn image recognition but still need kind of that little text boost, make sure they have that text boost so they can kind of understand the context of the image and what's in it. And then, you know, they're starting to kind of explore the GS1 standards of kind of e-retail images, you know, put words on the images. That used to be a big no-no in SEO. Like, never put your words in an image, always put them behind them, but, you know, keep putting them behind them, but also start to put words on the image themselves. You know, so as these technologies evolve, you know, they'll be able to read the image and see exactly what the consumer is seeing, and you'll be able to call out very specific attributes when you're in a shopping environment. You know, what are the key attributes of this product, and right next to the product shot in the image, they'll be able to see that, because a lot of people kind of search through scrolling as opposed to reading all the descriptions now.
All right, I've got a question for you guys. So, we're talking a lot about search fragmentation. I think, do we believe that, the likes of Google and Bing, they'll have less overall searches on their, traditional searches on their platform with the, the rise of voice and, e-commerce platforms, different ways of searching? I guess my question is how do these innovations, how are they going to affect this industry, the paid search industry? Like, what is that going to look like in the future with more fragmentation and, more places to look for things?
I think a lot of these things are pretty cyclical. I know, way a long time ago with Dogpile and Alta Vista and Find What and Ask Jeeves and eSpotting and all those things. Like there was 20 little search engines that you had to, and actually I got my start in kind of aggregating all of those and saying, hey, I'll sell you this traffic. Mm-hmm. But there's obviously huge consolidation, and then we're starting to see some fragmentation, but I think it's very specific fragmentation, right? It's Amazon is clearly a leader in e-retail. I think just Google's quarterly earnings came out, and they saw growth in everything, and the Amazon effect didn't impact them. I think it's a kind of almost a rising tide floats all boats scenario more than what it means for this industry. I think that we've got some job security.
Nice. Well, that's reassuring.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple ways to go about that. And I think one is that as search becomes easier to perform, more searches are going to happen per person per day. So they're going to be, the inventory is not necessarily going to go down because search is being fragmented. Mm-hmm. Inventory, kind of the rising tide lifts all boats concept is, everyone's going to be searching more, maybe on more platforms, but, Google's not necessarily going to lose all these searches, or Bing's not going to lose all these searches. They'll just pick up additional searches in their core kind of functionality of what they deliver the best answers for. But I think from a marketer perspective, particularly on paid, we're going to see, I think, a blending of other channels or other departments that don't buy search having to kind of think about search in their buys. I think a good example of that is like an Alexa or Google Home, where there really aren't paid search advertising opportunities quite yet. Bain and Company did a study of Alexa product results, and they found that I think about 6% of the searches that they conducted returned the sponsored ad. That product, it didn't say it was a sponsored product, but so you see some relationships, but you think about those platforms, the advertising opportunities that are sort of more imminent are kind of oral, that the audio, like within a briefing, there's an ad in the middle, or if you're on like Pandora or Spotify, there might be an opportunity kind of like radio-like buys, which radio buyers probably aren't thinking that they're search buyers, but in a sense, you kind of become one when you're in that type of environment.
Okay. I think the automotive market has been similar in some small ways to the search market, if you think about it, right? We used to have all kinds of brands. Then they sort of conglomerated, and now there's, three maybe. But now you got a Tesla. You got somebody that kind of breaks free. And I think that's what we'll see in search engine marketing as well, or just in available places to do a search or to find what you're looking for. I think I keep going back to Pinterest. Amazon's another great example. Here's these two just behemoths that just, I wouldn't say they came out of nowhere, but they certainly weren't, they weren't Google, they weren't Bing, they weren't a search engine.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the panel. Oh, we have another question before we let you go. Brian?
Brian from Apt. Alex, you should get the Family Hub from Samsung. You could pick it up from Freeman or me. Dan, quick question. So, looks like you run, obviously, the SEO strategy for your agency. Are your recommendations for your clients Google first strategy for optimization practices for all these new search engines? I mean, have you seen any evolution that you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the classic agency answer and tell you it depends on the client, but there's a lot of truth in it. I think their cliches sometimes have some truth behind them, but I think that it depends what message you're trying to get out there and where you're trying to hit the customer. We like to break down kind of informational, navigational, transactional as kind of the different intents of a search. Where informational, you're really looking for just what's the answer to this question. I need information. And as you kind of move toward transactional, it's like I'm ready to purchase. And if you're thinking about transactional searches, it might not be a Google first strategy. Obviously they have Express and shopping, and sure, people do transactional searches, but if we keep going back to that study from Bloomreach, and Kenshu had a study as well that I think had 56% of product searches starting on Amazon, maybe you start with your Amazon content opportunity, or if you're a retailer, maybe you're thinking about the terms that you're optimizing toward should be a little bit more transactional. So you may not want to feature as much information about kind of the lifestyle around the product, but maybe more about the technical specs and the things that people are going to be looking for in the moment of when they're trying to transact.
I could jump here too, just as it relates to local search. So a lot of searches and voice search are triggering those local results, which is coming from Google My Business, and so our philosophy is every single one of the big players in local, whether that be Google, Bing, Facebook, Apple, they are very particular about how they want their data and what kind of categories you can include and how to optimize each one of those channels. And that traffic, is quote unquote free, and it's hugely impactful. The amount of driving directions and calls and visits to your website that come from those are a lot of times in location businesses the #1 source of traffic. So optimizing for each one of those channels specifically is well worth your time.
One more question? No, we do.
Jared from Syzygy. I think we often fall, from an agency or advertiser perspective, we are challenged with keeping up with best practice in technology and platforms, and but also staying ahead of the curve. So I think with Google has led the charge in a lot of different ways. Whether if like 5 years ago it was schema markup and tagging your content properly, and it was like, okay, you need a responsive site because of this big mobile lift, and now it's accelerated mobile pages. With all these technologies and kind of Google setting those principles, how do you guys see that shake out with staying ahead of the curve? How much of it is staying ahead of the curve versus just best practice in the moment?
Well, I'm very bullish on AMP, so I'm glad you brought that up. We actually have a client that we've been testing that with, and the results have been remarkable. And I think AMP is kind of a good microcosm of what that kind of future experience needs to look like. I mean, we're in kind of an age now where all the power has kind of shifted from the businesses to the consumer in determining what kind of journey you want to take, how you want to interact with things, when you want to interact with them. It's kind of like we're living in a Black Mirror episode a little bit, but I think when you think about what the consumer really wants, in different moments they want different things, but ultimately they want kind of ego. They want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to be able to do it as quickly as possible without any friction, and ads inherently kind of drive friction. And we talked a little bit about this from the privacy standpoint of how do you make that advertising experience something that doesn't have friction, but is actually helping to take the consumer and bring them to the place that they were already going, is sort of a surprise and delight. Like, oh, I didn't know that was an option for me. And so I think kind of quickness and speed and relevance are going to consistently be the most important things to deliver to consumers. And so when you're vetting these different platforms or new technologies, I think those are the two things that you should really think about. Is this going to bring speed to the experience, and is it going to be relevant to the consumer?
All right. Hey, guys, thanks very much. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So I think for the final few minutes that we have here, I'm going to kind of operate this last session as a giant roundtable. So I'm soliciting feedback from you guys really right now. Actually, why don't we turn this off? So